I knew the day was going to go south the moment I walked into the break room and saw Bradley trying to operate the espresso machine. The man looked like he was attempting to defuse a live warhead, but with significantly less intelligence and a lot more expensive hair gel. I am Walter Sinclair, by the way. I am 48 years old, and I serve as the lead cryptographer for a defense contractor that I cannot name without 3 different federal agencies burying this story under mountains of black ink. My job is simple to describe, but nearly impossible to execute. I build the digital vaults that protect our country's critical infrastructure, specifically the municipal power grids and water treatment facilities, from foreign state actors who would love nothing more than to plunge the eastern seaboard into darkness. I do not deal in theories or possibilities. I deal in 256-bit encryption keys and absolute security. I was leaning against the counter, nursing a mug of plain black tea, watching Bradley wrestle with a single-use coffee pod that was clearly marked as decaf. He was muttering under his breath about optimizing his morning caffeine throughput. Bradley was the new operations manager, sent down from the corporate headquarters 3 weeks ago to streamline our division. In my line of work, the word streamline is almost always a euphemism for firing the highly skilled specialists who actually understand how the machinery works, only to replace them with young, cheap yes-men who think Python is just a reptile. Bradley finally managed to force the machine to spit out a lukewarm cup of brown sludge. He turned toward me, offering that tight-lipped, dead-eyed nod that middle managers practice in the bathroom mirror before meetings. "Walter," he said. It sounded less like a greeting and more like he was acknowledging a particularly stubborn stain on his expensive leather shoes. "Bradley," I replied, keeping my voice flat. I hold a security clearance level that would make his head spin, but to Bradley, I was just a stubborn legacy employee who refused to use his colorful progress tracking charts. Before I tell you how this human embodiment of a corporate newsletter tried to dismantle my career, do me a quick favor. Hit the subscribe button and upvote this story. It feeds my internal furnace of righteous indignation, and seeing the numbers rise is one of the few simple pleasures I have left these days. Thanks. You guys are the real heroes. I walk back to my office, which my team affectionately refers to as the war room. It is a windowless concrete box kept at exactly 68 degrees, crammed with enough computing power to simulate the weather patterns of the entire planet. I sat down at my workstation. I was in the middle of writing the final encryption layer for a federal pipeline. This was not the kind of standard commercial code you use to secure a mobile shopping application. This was the mathematical equivalent of pouring 10 feet of reinforced concrete over a nuclear reactor. One misplaced semicolon, one minor weakness in the handshake protocol, and the entire system could be compromised by malicious actors. My fingers flew across the keyboard. When I am in the zone, it does not feel like typing. It feels like weaving. I was constructing a safety net out of pure mathematics. The cursor blinked steadily on the screen, a digital heartbeat. I hit the Enter key, and the compilation progress bar filled with a satisfying green hue. I locked my terminal. My security protocol is absolute and unchanging. I lock the screen, remove my hardware token, verify the physical lock on the tower, and only then do I step away. I grabbed my leather bag and headed out to the lobby to grab a quick sandwich for lunch. The hallway was quiet, filled with the sterile silence that only a multi-million-dollar government contract can buy. I reached the heavy security doors that separate our classified space from the public lobby and tapped my access card. The reader chimed twice, but instead of the usual green light, it flashed red. Access denied. I wiped the plastic card on my jeans, a universal gesture of empty hope, and tried again. Red light. Access denied. A cold sensation settled in the pit of my stomach. These cards do not simply fail. They are embedded with encrypted chips monitored by our internal security servers. A failure here is never a technical glitch. It is a deliberate decision. I looked up at the security camera mounted in the corner. Normally, the guards would notice the error and buzz me through within 3 seconds. 10 seconds passed, and the heavy bolt remained locked. I had to press the manual intercom button. "Security, this is Walter. The badge reader on the west exit is rejecting my card." A moment later, a voice crackled through the static. It was not Barney Higgins, the veteran guard who had worked here for 15 years. It sounded like a young kid, nervous and uncertain. "Hold on," the voice said. "The system is showing a synchronization delay. I will override it and buzz you through." The door clicked and I pushed it open. My internal radar was pinging loudly. A synchronization delay on a closed-loop security network is a technical impossibility unless someone has been actively tampering with the central database. I went to the deli across the street, bought a turkey sandwich that tasted like cardboard, and ate it while staring blankly at the brick wall. My mind was racing. Yesterday afternoon, I had spotted Bradley hovering near the systems administrator's desk, whispering to a junior technician, whose sloppy password habits I had flagged in 3 separate security reports. I threw the rest of my lunch in the trash and headed back. The badge worked on the outer turnstile, but there was a distinct delay. A normal user would not notice a quarter of a second lag, but to a cryptographer, it meant the data packet was being redirected to another server before approval. Someone was actively monitoring my credentials. I returned to the war room, swiped my card, and walked inside. The door had been locked exactly as I left it, but when I woke my monitor, I noticed a minimized terminal window tucked into the bottom right corner of the screen. I did not touch the mouse. I did not move. I sat perfectly still, blending into the background. Someone had accessed my workstation during the 20 minutes I was eating my sandwich. I used a custom keyboard shortcut I had programmed years ago, which bypasses the user interface and pulls up the raw system logs directly. There it was. User Walter, administrator access, logged in at 12:14. Command entered. Export all directories to a null device. They had tried to copy my entire repository of cryptographic tools, but they were incredibly sloppy. The syntax was completely wrong. They had tried to pipe the data to a null destination, thinking it meant a hidden folder, when in reality they had just dumped the files into a digital void. It was amateur hour. It was offensive. It was almost certainly Bradley, or some cheap contractor he had hired who believed he could learn network infiltration from watching videos online. I closed the log window without clearing the history. If they were already inside my network, I needed proof. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a tube of lip balm. Except it was not lip balm. It was a custom-built, heavily encrypted storage drive designed to look like a cheap plastic container. I plugged it into the secondary maintenance port on the back of the tower, a port I had personally excluded from the monitoring software. I began a silent mirror of the entire server log, capturing every keystroke, every failed login, and every unauthorized access attempt from the last 24 hours. If Bradley wanted to play dirty, I was going to make sure I had the ledger. The formal summons arrived at exactly 9 o'clock the following morning. It was a simple calendar invitation titled Status Review, marked with high importance, with no agenda attached. The participants listed were myself, Bradley Thorne, and Clara Jennings, the Director of Human Resources. Clara was a woman who lived in a permanent state of agitation and always smelled like a mixture of strong lavender and lavender-scented panic. I walked down the carpeted hallway and stepped into the main conference room. The room was standard corporate fare. Glass walls that offered no real privacy, a heavy table made of compressed particle board that wobbled whenever anyone leaned on it, and a motivational poster on the wall showing a team of rowers with the word synergy printed in bold letters. Bradley was already seated at the head of the table. He was not wearing a tie, opting instead for a gray quarter-zip fleece that was meant to convey casual authority. A thick paper folder sat on the table in front of him. Clara would not look me in the eye. She was busy rearranging a stack of standard exit interview forms that she did not need yet. "Walter, please take a seat," Bradley said. He tried to sound solemn and professional, but I could see the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. The man was practically vibrating with the excitement of finally exerting control over the department. I sat down, keeping my back straight and my hands resting flat on the table. "Is there a problem with the new encryption module?" I asked. The morning compilation succeeded without any errors. "This meeting is not about your technical performance, Walter," Bradley said, opening the folder. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward me. It was printed on the company's official letterhead, but it lacked the official federal seals. "The department of defense watermarks and the automated verification codes that always accompany government security clearance updates. The text was printed in a standard clean font, stating that my top secret security clearance had expired due to an administrative oversight and was suspended pending further review. The document stated that due to this clearance suspension, my access to all secure systems was revoked and my employment was terminated, effective immediately. I stared at the paper for a moment. It took every ounce of my self-control not to laugh out loud. Federal security clearances do not simply expire because of an administrative lapse. The government operates on a strict schedule, and my formal reinvestigation was not scheduled for another 2 years. More importantly, if my clearance had actually been suspended, I would not be sitting in a carpeted conference room with a middle manager and a nervous human resources director. I would have been met at the entrance by armed federal security officers and escorted to a secure room to explain the situation. This paper was a complete fabrication, a clumsy forgery designed to push me out the door without triggering the company's internal wrongful termination protocols. "Your clearance has expired, Walter," Bradley said, his voice dropping into a rehearsed tone of authority. "Without active clearance, you are a legal liability to this firm. We cannot allow you to remain on the premises." Clara cleared her throat, her voice trembling slightly. "We have prepared a severance package for you, Walter. It includes 2 weeks of pay and a continuation of your health benefits. We only require you to sign this standard non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement before you leave today." "I am not signing anything," I said, keeping my voice flat and cold. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bradley stopped tapping his pen against the table. "What do you mean you are not signing?" he asked. "I am not signing a voluntary separation agreement," I explained. "If you are terminating my employment based on a clearance failure, then put that down as the official reason in the system. File the paperwork stating that I was fired due to a security clearance revocation. Do it right now." Bradley sneered, his mask of corporate politeness slipping away. "Fine," he said. "We will process it as a termination. Hand over your building badge and your security token." I reached into my bag and pulled out the plastic security card that had been my key to this facility for the past 12 years. I placed it on the table. Next to it, I laid the hardware token that generated my access codes. "And the keys?" Bradley demanded. "What keys?" I asked. "The encryption keys," he said. "The master access codes for the secure storage vault. We need them to continue the project." I looked at him, realizing the entire scope of his plan. He wanted to fire me, hand my work to his friend, and claim all the credit for saving the company money. "The keys are not physical items, Bradley," I said, speaking slowly. "They are rotating mathematical seeds tied directly to my biometric profile. The system generates them automatically based on my identity. I cannot simply hand them to you." "We will find a way to access them," Bradley snapped. "Now please collect your personal items. Security will escort you to the exit." I stood up, ignoring Clara completely, and looked Bradley directly in the eyes. "You have absolutely no idea what you are doing, do you?" I said. "You think this is just basic office support. You think you can just swap out the parts and the machine will keep running." "I think your time here is done, Walter," he replied. "We need fresh perspective and employees who are willing to cooperate." I turned and walked out of the room. I did not slam the door. I walked down to the lobby where Barney Higgins looked up from his monitors, looking confused as I signed the visitor log. "Leaving early today, Walter?" he asked. "Something like that, Barney," I said. "Take care of yourself." I walked out into the heavy afternoon heat. The sun was bright, and the asphalt of the parking lot was radiating heat. I got into my car, started the engine, and sat there for a full minute, waiting for the rush of adrenaline to subside. Bradley had forged a federal document to justify firing a cleared employee. That was not just an HR violation. That was a serious federal crime under Title 18 of the United States Code, and I was going to make sure the proper authorities were fully informed. I did not drive home. Instead, I drove to a quiet office park located about 5 miles away from the main highway. The building had no signs on the exterior, only a number plate on the door. It was a secure federal liaison site, a place where cleared personnel could report security compromises without using standard corporate channels. I parked my car, grabbed my lip balm drive containing the mirrored system logs, and walked inside. Bradley thought he had successfully locked me out of my career. But he did not realize he had just cut the brakes on his own vehicle while parking on a steep hill. It took less than 24 hours for Bradley to reveal his grand plan to the rest of the department. I was sitting in my home study, a room equipped with dedicated security hardware that is far more advanced than anything in the company's main building, watching the entire sequence of events unfold on a secondary monitor. As the designer of the company's security architecture, I had built a secure maintenance port into the system years ago. It was not a malicious backdoor, but rather an emergency access loop that bypassed the primary authentication servers and connected directly to the system kernel. It was completely undetectable unless you knew the exact sequence of data packets to look for in the network traffic. Bradley did not even know what network traffic looked like. Using this connection, I accessed the internal security cameras in the war room. Bradley had called an urgent meeting of the entire engineering team. He was standing at the front of the room, looking proud. Standing next to him was a young man who looked like he had been created by a marketing agency to represent a typical technology enthusiast. He was wearing tight designer jeans, a very expensive hooded sweatshirt, and had hair that looked messy in a way that required a lot of effort to maintain. This was Julian Pierce, his friend from the West Coast. "Team," Bradley announced, his voice carrying through the small speakers of the camera feed. "I want to introduce you to the new lead of our encryption division. This is Julian. He has joined us to modernize our software stack. We are going to eliminate the legacy bloatware and streamline our code." Legacy bloatware. He was referring to the polymorphic encryption engine I had spent 4 years developing, the one that defended municipal systems against advanced digital attacks in real time. Julian smiled and waved. "Hey everyone," he said. "I am ready to help us write some clean code. We are going to get rid of all this heavy, old-fashioned architecture." I watched the screen as my former colleagues sat in complete silence. Cynthia Woods, one of our senior analysts, raised her hand. "Julian, welcome," she said. "Does this mean you will be managing the manual key rotations? The next rotation is scheduled for 1800 hours tonight." Julian laughed, a nervous sound. "Key rotation? Yeah, we will automate that. I have a script written in Node.js that handles dynamic key generation. It is very lightweight and efficient." I leaned back in my chair and sighed. Using a common web framework to secure a military-grade localized network is like trying to secure a vault door with paper tape. Later that afternoon, the camera feed showed Julian sitting at my desk. He had his feet resting on the corner of the desk, typing on a mechanical keyboard with very loud switches. I switched my monitor to mirror his terminal window, so I could see exactly what he was doing. He typed a command to update the local repositories. The screen returned an error, repository not found. He tried to clone a public code repository from the internet. The screen returned another error, firewall blocking external connection. He was actively trying to pull unverified code from the public internet directly into a secure, classified military-grade network. The sheer ignorance of basic security protocols was staggering. Bradley walked into the room a few minutes later, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "How is it going, Julian?" he asked. "Are you getting into the code?" "Yeah," Julian replied, spinning my chair around. "The previous administrator had this system locked down way too tight. The user permissions are a mess. I am going to have to bypass the main security filters just to install my utility tools." "Do whatever you need to do," Bradley said, taking a sip of his coffee. "Just make sure the demo is ready for the board of directors on Friday. I told the executives we would have the new interface running by then." "No problem," Julian said. "I am clearing out the old system checks now so we can start fresh." A cold feeling washed over me. The system checks were not just basic log files. They were the security integrity monitors. They verified that the encrypted data blocks had not been altered. If those checks were removed without the proper administrative rehashing sequence, which only existed on my secure drive and in my memory, the system would interpret the action as a hostile attack. It was designed with a dead man's switch. If the integrity checks vanished, the software would assume the physical server had been captured by enemy forces. It would immediately lock down all files. encrypting the database into a solid block of mathematical noise that cannot be decrypted without the primary master key. I watched Julian type the command to delete the system check directory. He hesitated for a second. "Go ahead," Bradley urged him. "Let us clear the slate." Julian pressed the enter key. On my monitor, the process executed silently. On their screens, the prompt simply returned to a blank line. "Done," Julian said. "That was easy." They had no idea they had just sealed their own fate. The silent alarm was indeed silent. There were no flashing lights or loud sirens in the company's building, but the security network operated exactly as it was designed to do. The moment the integrity checks were deleted, a small packet of data was transmitted through a dedicated backup line directly to the Defense Monitoring Center. Within 2 minutes, my encrypted government phone buzzed. It was an alert from the secure communication application. I unlocked the phone using my biometric signature. A chat window opened with Roger Campbell, the agency director. "Walter, we have detected an integrity failure on the primary database node," the message read. "Did you authorize a directory clear?" I replied immediately. "Negative, Director. I was terminated yesterday by Bradley Thorne, who claimed my clearance had expired. I am currently locked out of the building. The current system activity is completely unauthorized." A few moments passed as the director processed the information. Then he replied, "We have no record of any clearance suspension. Your status remains active and clear. Bradley Thorne has no authority to revoke your access. Do not attempt to log in remotely. Do not contact the office. We are freezing the company's federal contracts immediately due to a Category 1 security breach. An investigation team is being deployed. Stay near your phone." I put the phone down, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. A Category 1 freeze is the ultimate penalty for a contractor. It means all funding is stopped, all work must cease, and the company is legally barred from accessing any government networks until a full forensic audit is completed. On my monitor, I watched the panic begin to set in. Julian was staring at his screen, his hands hovering over the keyboard. "Bradley," he called out, "something strange is happening. The files are not opening. The file names are all changing to random strings of characters." Bradley walked over and leaned over his shoulder. "What do you mean?" "It is probably just the system reorganizing the data. Give it a minute." "No," Julian said, his voice rising. "The entire directory is locked. It is not responding to any commands." The text on the screen was cascading rapidly now as the encryption system completed its security lockdown. Bradley's desk phone began to ring. He looked at the caller ID, saw it was an office code from Washington, and pressed the button to send it to voicemail. "Probably another vendor calling about software renewals," he muttered. He had no idea he had just ignored a direct call from the Department of Defense. "Julian, just restart the server," Bradley ordered. "That always fixes the system when it freezes." Julian reached for the physical power switch on the main server rack. I wanted to yell through the screen. A hard power cycle during an active encryption cascade would guarantee the corruption of the database headers, making recovery almost impossible without the master backup keys. Julian pressed the button. The lights on the server rack went dark. A moment later, Director Campbell messaged me again. "Node is offline." "Did they pull the power?" I replied. "Yes, Director. They executed a manual reboot during the lockdown cascade. The database headers are likely corrupted." The director's response was short. "Understood. The asset preservation team will arrive in the morning." Bradley and Julian were now sitting in the quiet war room. Julian turned the power back on. The server began its boot sequence, but the status lights did not return to their normal green state. Instead, they began to pulse in a slow, steady amber pattern. A message appeared on the main screen: "Decryption key missing. System lockout active." Bradley looked worried now. "Just enter the administrator password," he said. "I tried," Julian replied, his voice shaking. "It is not accepting it. The system says user unauthorized and has locked the interface for 60 minutes. We need to call the database support line." "I cannot," Julian whispered. "The support account is registered under Walter's name and token. When you removed him from the system, it automatically deactivated the support contract." Bradley stood in silence, staring at the amber lights. He had my security token in his pocket, but he did not have my biometrics, and he did not have the master key. My phone vibrated. It was a text message from Bradley. Walter, I hope you are having a good week, the message read. We have encountered a minor system glitch with the new software update. We would like you to come in tomorrow morning for a brief consultation to resolve it. We are willing to discuss a significant increase in your compensation package. I did not reply. The red lights on the server rack began to flash, indicating that the final security purge sequence had been initiated. They had exactly 12 hours before the system wiped the hard drives to prevent unauthorized access. The clock was ticking, and they had no way to stop it. The next morning at 8 o'clock, a large black Suburban with government license plates pulled up to the front entrance of the office building. Special Agent Diana Mercer of the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency stepped out of the vehicle, accompanied by two armed military police officers. They walked past the security desk, ignoring the turnstiles entirely, and headed straight for the fourth floor. I arrived 20 minutes later, riding in a separate vehicle sent by Director Campbell. As I entered the lobby, Barney Higgins gave me a wide-eyed look. "Walter, what is going on?" he asked. "Just resolving an administrative lapse, Barney," I said, walking toward the elevator. When the elevator doors opened on the fourth floor, the hallway was filled with tension. Lawrence Vance, the chief executive officer of the firm, was pacing back and forth, shouting into his phone. Bradley Thorne was standing nearby, looking paced and exhausted, his fleece vest wrinkled. Julian was sitting on a wooden bench, staring at the floor with his head in his hands. Special Agent Mercer was standing near the door of the war room, holding a clipboard and looking at Bradley with cold professional detachment. Bradley saw me walk out of the elevator and rushed forward. "Walter, thank goodness you are here," he said, his voice cracking. "Tell these officers that this is just a misunderstanding. You can unlock the system, right?" I did not look at him. I walked past him and stood in front of Agent Mercer. "Agent Mercer, I am Walter Sinclair," I said. She nodded. "Mr. Sinclair, Director Campbell briefed me on the situation. The system is in a Level 4 security lockdown. The current staff attempted a hard reboot during an integrity cascade, and we have lost all telemetry. They are completely locked out." I turned to Bradley, who was looking at me with desperation. "I cannot help you, Bradley," I said. "My clearance has expired, remember? You gave me the official notice yourself. You said I was a legal liability to the firm." Mr. Vance, the CEO, stopped his phone conversation and walked over. "What clearance expiration?" he demanded, looking from Bradley to me. "Walter has been our lead cryptographer for over a decade. His clearance is the foundation of our defense contracts." "Bradley terminated my employment yesterday," I explained to the CEO. "He claimed my clearance was revoked by the government and forged a notification document to force me out. Then he gave access to the secure server to his friend Julian, who attempted to bypass the security protocols and triggered the system lockdown." The CEO turned on Bradley, his face turning red with anger. "You forged a federal clearance revocation?" he roared. "Is this true, Bradley?" Bradley began to stammer, his eyes darting around the hallway. "It was a cost-saving measure, Lawrence. We were trying to reduce overhead. Julian was going to handle the system for half the cost." "And look what your cost-saving measure has done," I said, pointing toward the war room door. The red status lights were flashing rapidly now. "We have less than 4 minutes before the system executes a permanent database wipe to protect the data from unauthorized access." Agent Mercer looked at her watch. "Mr. Sinclair, if you can restore the system, please do so now," she said. "Otherwise, we will seize all physical assets, suspend this firm's operating license, and proceed with arrests." I walked into the war room. The room was hot, the cooling fans running at full speed. I sat down at my desk, pulled the lip balm container from my pocket, and unscrewed the cap. I plugged the USB drive into the secondary maintenance port on the back of the computer tower. I typed my administrative override command, bypassing the locked main interface, and verified my identity using the hardware key on the drive. The screen paused. The scrolling red error messages stopped. The prompt displayed, "Key verified. Welcome, architect." Ought to undid to abort but the database purge and restore the system integrity checks from my secure backup. The progress bar moved quickly across the screen. 10%, 50%, 100%. The flashing red lights on the server rack slowed, turned to amber, and finally settled into a solid, steady green. The cooling fans began to quiet down. The system was fully restored and the data was secure. I stood up and walked back out into the hallway. The system is online, I told Agent Mercer. The integrity of the vault is at 100%. Agent Mercer turned to the two military police officers. "Detain Mr. Thorne," she ordered. Bradley gasped as the officers stepped forward and grabbed his arms. "On what charges?" he yelled. Special Agent Mercer pulled the forged document from her clipboard. Forgery of official government documents under Title 18, United States Code, Section 506, making false statements under Section 1001, and unauthorized access to a protected defense computer under Section 1030. You will have plenty of time to discuss your cost-saving measures with a federal prosecutor. As the officers led a shouting Bradley toward the elevator, the CEO turned to me, his voice shaking. "Walter, please, we need you. I will triple your salary. We will give you stock options. You can have complete control over the department." I looked at him, then at the green lights of the server rack. "I am not coming back, Mr. Vance," I said. "You allowed a middle manager to lock me out of my own system without verifying the facts. You cared more about the numbers than the security of the network. I cannot work for a firm like that." Agent Mercer stepped beside me. "Mr. Sinclair has accepted a direct position with our agency," she told the CEO. "The contract for this node is being transferred to federal control, and your firm's clearance authorization is suspended pending a complete review." I packed my personal items into my bag, including my favorite mug and my small desk plant. As I walked toward the elevator, I passed Julian, who was still sitting on the bench. I did not say anything to him. He was just a symptom of a larger corporate disease. I walked out of the building and into the bright morning sunshine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a LinkedIn notification. "Bradley Thorne wants to connect with you." I laughed, hit the block button, and opened my email. Director Campbell had already sent over my official federal onboarding documents. My clearance had not expired. It had just been upgraded. I got into my car and drove away, leaving the company and its empty synergy behind. The code always remembers the truth, even when managers try to forge it. And in the end, the system worked exactly as it was written.